What's up, guys? So today I am going to talk about hitting a goal of mine for the year, which was a sub 6 minute mile, and doing so without losing all of my gains. So some people have mentioned in my podcast that I'm looking leaner, I'm looking thinner. I definitely am. I'm down to the low 180s at this point. Jawline is definitely coming in quite a bit, but I'm also losing some of that size, that appearance, especially in normal clothes. Neck is skinnier, forearms, all that. So every time I cut or bulk, there's always that kind of balance. Unless you're somebody who's really gifted or using quite a bit of performance enhancing drugs, most of the time, if you're getting really lean, you're not gonna look terribly big in clothes. And if you are looking very big in clothes, you're probably not gonna have a great six pack to go along with that. So for me, this was a cutting phase. And I've actually never been a runner, which is why if you're hearing this, some people might think, well, is a 6 minute mile even impressive? And I would actually say it's not really that impressive to anybody who is a runner. Just like, I think if you were a runner, maybe a 225 bench would be a really big deal for you. But for us who are really into lifting, a 225 bench is kind of like that first milestone of like, okay, now I'm like really getting into lifting. I guess you could say 135, but most people hit that pretty quickly. And 225 is like, all right, it's significant, but it's not in any way an advanced bench. And I definitely realized that a 6 minute mile is not really an advanced speed. But I posted about it. A number of people said that they did think it was a good accomplishment. I'm personally actually very proud of it, and I'll get into why. And some other people have inquired about how you can concurrently train an endurance activity, or I wouldn't call a mile run an endurance activity, and ask about the principle of doing them concurrently. There are some other people out there who are really good resources on that. Steve Shaw is one who I would recommend, he has been a very successful powerlifter, as well as somebody who is now doing very long runs. Alex Viada is another one who has been around for a while and really excels in both areas. So if you really are interested in that, I would look at those two sources. I'm sure there's others out there as well. Now for me, why did I have this goal? So last year I did a VO2 max test, and it was okay. It was a little bit above average for my age, but I would have liked to have seen it higher. So I said, all right, well, let me just see how, I had not run in literally probably a decade. So I said, all right, let me see how that feels if I just do 7.5 miles an hour. So that's an 8 minute mile. It was pretty easy. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll keep doing it. Well, my friend visited and we had a race basically to see who could go the longest at 10 miles an hour. So shortly after that 8 minute mile, I was like, all right, let's just actually see what I can do. And I knew that obviously for a 6 minute mile, you've got to go 10 miles per hour on average. And so I wanted to kind of see like how long I could do that. And I eventually, pretty soon when I tried that, I hit 4 minutes. But that was like an all out, holy crap, I am dying. Like I gun to my head, could not go any further. And I am somebody who, when I'm gonna push myself, like I just mentally have a hard time not going as hard as I can if I tell myself that's what I'm gonna do. So that was a year ago, and I was like, okay, maybe I actually will start this running thing. Almost immediately started getting shin splints. I'm just not a runner. Even when I was in high school and I was really skinny, again, I'm 6'1". When I was like 145, 150 pounds, I ran maybe like a 7 minute mile, okay? When everybody's doing the mile in high school and all that on the track. So I've just never been a fast person at all. So I thought like, okay, if I could do a 6 minute mile, that would be a big accomplishment for me. Again, for some people, not at all. So in order to train for that, because a lot of people were asking me, how did I train for it? And obviously gains and strength are really important to me. So sure, I could just stop lifting. I could really completely stop lifting my upper body, lose that weight, and then become faster and faster. But I don't want to sacrifice any muscle. So how do I do that? Well, weight is still going to be a factor, right? So if you are 15, 20% body fat and you lose fat, you're probably going to be faster. So I knew, that's not why I cut, but it was happening while I cut. So I figured, okay, that's gonna be a benefit to me. So I started when I was probably about 195, and now I'm closer to 180. So clearly that was a big part of it. I figured technique would be a big part of it, because again, since I'm not a runner, that's an area that I could improve. And then there's the ability of just, can you push harder? And frankly, as I said, compared to that 4 minutes, I literally could not have pushed harder. So what I did was very simple. If you look at the studies on VO2 max, it's pretty clear that high intensity and interval training will increase VO2 max more than just steady state cardio. Now, obviously it's gonna depend on how much of those two modalities you're doing, but generally that's what's seen. So once a week, I was doing some running. The other one time a week of doing HIIT, I was doing basically like either on the stairs or on a bike. So I was actually only running once, maybe sometimes twice per week. And I did 10 miles an hour for 1 minute at a time. And then I would just do that 6 times. And that was, difficult, but not that difficult. And I would increase that over time to then 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. Eventually I got up to like 10.7 for 6 intervals of 1 minute. Then I said, okay, you know what? Like I'm so used to doing like lifting type exertion. So I'm exerting myself 30 to 60 seconds. But when it comes to a run, you have to get used to it. The worst thing about it, why I hate cardio like that, is getting used to this constant burn. I have done insanely difficult leg workouts to the point that I wanted to throw up, or I have thrown up, where I was about to pass out, where personal trainers came up to me asking if I was okay. And don't get me wrong, it can be extremely brutal, but you get to take a break between sets. If you are going to do, let's say, a 5K, literally one of the worst experiences of my life was when I was like 12 years old and I did a 5K, and anybody could just, maybe not anybody, but to just jog a 5K would be nothing. But I was like, no, I need to hit maximum performance, which why I thought that I need to do that for like a charity run at 12 years old, I have no idea. But I felt like I needed to do it. And it was completely miserable. Like it was genuinely one of my worst memories because I was just pushing as hard as I could and there's just no break. So with a mile even, that's a while, and I was talking to my friend about this. He's like, yeah, 6 minutes, it just doesn't sound like that long. And I agree. It's the same thing like 10 miles an hour doesn't sound that fast, but it's like, okay, well, could you bench 50-pound dumbbells? Sure, no problem. Could you do it for 100 reps? Probably not. It's going to get really hard at some point. So for me, I was like, I need to get used to going for longer periods of time. So I started doing longer intervals of 2 minutes, and I took the speed down a little bit, and I increased the interval time. Eventually, I did it where I was doing 3 minutes from there, but then again, I had to go down in speed a little bit. So by the time I was actually ready to do this test, to be honest with you, I did not think I was going to get it, because when I was doing 3 2-minute intervals at 10 miles an hour, that was still pretty hard. Like each one, and you're talking like a minute or two between intervals. So I'm like, if I'm only accumulating 6 minutes at 10 miles an hour, and that's this difficult, like literally heart rate 183 beats per minute, how could I possibly do it for 6 minutes? But that day, now I will also say I was doing the running after leg training. So I was figuring, let me do it fresh. Let me, wear like the right clothing. I have crappy shoes. But I just thought, okay, maybe I can just push. Got to 4 minutes. And I was like, okay, so I've beaten last time, good. Got to 4.5, and I was like, I got to be able to make it to 5, but I'm going to stop it at 5. Like in my head even, I was like telling myself, like, just make it to 5 and I will just be done. Got to 5, and then it's 5:10, and then it's 5:15. I was like, I have to be able to go another 20 seconds. And it's really actually kind of amazing how hard you can push yourself if you just break it up and like, okay, 5 more seconds, another 5 more seconds, and you can just keep going. And if anything, this is kind of funny because I genuinely didn't think I was going to get it. I just thought to myself, well, like the idea of thinking even beyond that wasn't even on my mind. But I thought back to like when Ronnie Coleman said that if he has any regrets, it's when he did 800 for 2 on a squat and he wishes he would have gone for that third. And it's funny because not that I in any way could compare myself to Ronnie Coleman, but when I was done, I was like, man, I wish I could have maybe picked up the pace just the slightest amount so I could say it was, maybe like a 5:50. So technically, yes, I just barely beat my goal of the 6-minute mile, but part of me wishes I would have even done it like a little bit more concretely, because I can tell you, I have no interest in doing that again anytime soon. It was completely miserable. But yeah, that was something I was actually really proud of. Again, I know anybody who's got a running background is probably going to hear this and think like, it's such a mediocre goal, who cares? But again, to me, with my running background, it was actually a pretty big accomplishment. And afterwards, there's not a lot that I do with lifting or anything that I feel like just proud of myself, or even like getting a doctorate. Like it was kind of just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. Like not that like we wouldn't celebrate, but it's kind of just like, yeah, that's just what I'm doing. And so to have a moment where I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty proud of that was a cool feeling. Now, a lot of people are gonna wonder, how can you do that while maintaining strength, right? So it wasn't very long ago, it was actually only a couple weeks ago that I had a lifetime PR on pull-ups, 45 pounds attached to me for 15 reps. I've also recently done 135 pounds attached to me for 3 reps. I've done 100 pounds attached to me for 6 reps. I've done overhead presses, not at PR level for overhead press recently because I haven't done a specialization phase in a while, but bench press 225 for 16 was not that long ago. Most of my strength is actually pretty on par. And so even if you maintain your strength, when you diet, you're going to look skinnier. Like the fat is coming off, you are going to lose some lean mass, whether that lean mass is mostly water and glycogen, probably some muscle, but strength maintenance was actually quite good. And so how do you accomplish that? How do you, again, for me, do what is very difficult running performance and then also be able to maintain your strength performance? And one of those things is that I've been lifting for so long, it takes a lot to actually lose it, right? So as long as I maintain some volume, really, as long I'm basically at maintenance volume while dieting and while also running. So I'm only doing about 6 sets per week per body part, okay? So they are intense sets. They're pretty much all to failure, but for the most part, like it doesn't go above 6 sets. Back does get a little bit more, 12 sets, because I do 6 vertical pulling, 6 horizontal pulling. But the volume is very low, so it makes more room for recovery. So that's one aspect of it. 2, the running volume was not that high. I stuck to high intensity interval training because, as I mentioned, the literature seems to support that increases your VO2 max more. And then a lot of the running performance also came simply from weight loss. Now, when I did it last year, I was about 190. Here, I was about 181, 182. So that alone is going to be able to increase my running performance in terms of distance over time. And you could make an argument that I could actually become a much better runner. I mean, a lot of people who are runners, who are actually doing this regularly, run every day or at least multiple times per week. I was actually doing this running 1 time per week. I have totally like just crap shoes, not that it's gonna make that much of a difference, but just to be able to handle more volume and, maybe increase your pace a little bit. I mean, I have like clunky sneakers that I was wearing for this. So I think there's actually a lot that I could do to increase my performance. Again, mostly would probably come from increased running volume, but if I could handle that and then continue to maybe get down to like 175, I probably could get down to a 5:30 and maybe even eventually a 5-minute mile. I just don't have really any interest in that, to be honest. The reason I chose a mile time is because that's something that I think almost everybody can relate to. Everybody does the mile run in high school. People know what those times mean. So when I was thinking of a goal, that was why. It was like, okay, I can relate to what a mile time is. Other than that, most of the running goals to me would be pretty arbitrary and I just wouldn't care that much. So you have to keep in mind specificity. And if you want to maintain your muscle and you want to maintain your strength, you of course have to keep lifting, but you also, I would recommend keeping lifting with the exercises that you're used to doing and the same kind of setup, again, unless you were doing higher volume where that will have to back off. But for me, it was actually pretty reasonable to maintain the majority of my strength. So if you want to have these concurrent goals, I would say start very slow, probably eat at maintenance for the time being and see how you adapt. So back off to either maintenance or slightly above maintenance volume on working out. And if you want to add cardio, then add it once a week, see how you do. If you do okay with that and strength does not drop off at all, or you're still gaining strength, if you're at an intermediate phase where you are actually trying to gain in both areas at the same time, see that you're able to, and I would separate the two most of the time. Generally speaking, I would not recommend for most people to be doing a lot of cardio combined with a lot of their working out. If you can separate the modalities so that there's less of an interference effect, that is usually seen to be a better option. If you have to do it on the same day, you might consider an AM session and a PM session. So again, it goes back to I was able to hit this goal even with doing a lot of things suboptimally. And there is a part of me that wonders, well, what if you had done things optimally? What if you were running 3 times a week? What if you were separating them from your workouts? What if you were doing more intra-workout nutrition? Because I will say, while I'm not a huge proponent of intra-workout nutrition in terms of weightlifting and working out, once you get into more endurance activities, which again, a mile run is not, but if you're talking 5K, 10K, marathons, things like that, that actually can make a difference. And there's a whole nother science here that, again, I've just never had a huge interest in, but there's a whole nother science here where you can talk about how you can maximize the performance of both together or just all in endurance. And that's something that Mike Zordos has recently talked about. He's kind of taken a step back from powerlifting, and now he's really just going full marathon training. And, he's working with a trainer himself who I'm sure could really, elucidate on a lot of these topics. All right, guys, so I don't want to ramble too much, but I just wanted to go into that because it was a goal that I was very proud to hit. As the year comes to a close, I do usually set goals for myself, and I kind of, at the end of the year, kind of do a recap and see what I have accomplished. And as of now, there's really only about 2 that I have not accomplished yet for the year, so we will see how that goes. But it was a perfect time to test it out because I will be going back into a gaining phase pretty soon. Nothing crazy, no big bulks or anything like that, but this was a good time for me to test it. And I think it does show a lot that I was able to maintain almost 100% of my strength while doing this. All right, guys, well, if you like the topic, make sure to like the video, comment down below. It definitely helps with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to the channel for more like this.